Assalamu alaikum and a pleasant day to everyone. I am Salmandi Tuminaman. For today's lesson, I'm going to discuss the relative pronoun. A relative pronoun is a word that introduces a relative clause which provides additional information about a preceding noun or pronoun. On the other hand, these are words that connect a dependent clause to an independent clause. They act as a pronouns referring back to noun or pronoun in the main clause. The most common relative pronouns in English are who, whom, whose, which, and that. They use to introduce adjective clauses. When you're going to say adjective clauses, these are dependent clauses that function as adjectives, modifying nouns or pronouns. They provide descriptive information about the word they modify. These are the examples of relative pronouns. The first one is who. Who is used for people often functioning as a subject in the relative clause. For example, the woman who won the lottery is my neighbor. Who is a relative pronoun that refers to a people and acts as the subject of the relative clause. Who won the lottery is my neighbor introduces a clause that gives additional information about the woman. The next one is whom. It's used for people often functioning as the object in the relative clause. For example, the person whom I called was unavailable. Whom is a relative pronoun that refers to a people and acts as the object of a verb or preposition within the relative clause. So the object of the verb of that example is the word called. The third one is whose. It's used for people referring to possession in the relative clause. For example, the car whose engine is broken needs repair. So the whose there is a relative pronoun showing possession. It indicates that the engine belongs to the car. It modifies car and introduces a clause describing a characteristic of the car. The next one is which. It's used for things often functioning as a subject or object in the relative clause. For example, the house which is painted blue is for sale. So the word which is a relative pronoun that refers to a things or animals. In this example, it introduces a non-restrictive or non-essential clause describing an attribute of the house. This means the information in the clause is additional and not crucial for identifying the house. The last one is that. It's used for both people and things, often functioning as the subject or object in the relative clause. For example, the gift that I received was amazing. That is a versatile relative pronoun that can refer to both people and things. It introduces a restrictive or essential clause, meaning the clause is necessary to specify which gift is being referred to. Now let's move on to the neutral relative pronoun that. The pronoun that is described as a neutral form applicable to both persons and things, as I've said earlier. It's presented as a substitute for who, whom, or which in many cases. In other words, using that tends to make writing sound less formal. The first example is the book that I borrowed from the library is overdue. The main clause is the book is overdue. This is the core statement. That I borrowed from the library, this clause modifies book, specifying which book is overdue. It's restrictive because it's essential to identify the book in question. Without this clause, the sentence is unclear. It doesn't specify which book is overdue. The second example is the car that she bought last year is a hybrid. The main clause there is the car is a hybrid. This is the main point. That she bought last year, this clause modifies car, specifying which car is a hybrid. It's restrictive also because it limits which car is being discussed. Without it, the sentence is unclear also. It doesn't tell us which car out of all the cars is a hybrid. In short, these examples highlight the use of that to create clear, concise sentences by providing necessary information to identify the specific noun being described. Let's proceed to the formal writing whom must be used. The first example there is the candidate whom the committee interviewed impressed everyone. Whom is the object of the verb interviewed. The committee interviewed whom? The candidate, isn't it? Using who would be grammatically incorrect because who would be subject, implying the candidate was doing the interviewing. The second one is to whom did you address your letter? Whom is the object of the preposition to. This is a slightly more complex case because the rule remains whom is the object of a preposition. Let's proceed to the informal writing whom is optional. The first example, as you can see, informal way, the person whom I spoke to was very helpful. But in informal way, the person who I spoke to was very helpful, or even the person I spoke to was very helpful. The formal sentence correctly uses whom as the object of the preposition to, while the informal versions substitute who, which is grammatically less precise but perfectly acceptable in casual writing, or even omit the relative pronoun entirely. The second example, informal form, she's the woman whom everyone admires. In informal, she's the woman who everyone admires. Similar to the previous example, the formal sentence uses whom correctly as the object of the verb admires, while the informal version uses who, which is widely accepted in informal contexts. The next one is that which and whom are the only relative pronouns that can be left out. The first example there is the instrumental music that I like to hear often is that of Zamfir. The clause that I like to hear often is restrictive because it specifies which instrumental music is being discussed. Without it, the sentence would be, the instrumental music is that of Zamfir, which is much broader and less specific. The that can be omitted because the meaning remains clear even without it. So, the instrumental music I like to hear often is that of Zamfir. The second example is the house pest, which I hate to see are the rodents and the cockroach. The clause which I hate to see is restrictive because it identifies which house pests are being referred to. Omitting which doesn't change the essential meaning because the house pest I hate to see are the rodents and the cockroach. The next one is who, whom, and whose can be used in both essential, restrictive, and non-essential or non-restrictive clauses. First example is the man who came to dinner is the mayor. The clause who came to the dinner is non-restrictive because it provides additional information about the mayor but doesn't change the core fact that the man is the mayor. The commas clearly separate the non-restrictive clause from the main clause. These clauses add extra information about the noun but aren't essential to identifying it. They are always set off by commas, as well as removing a non-restrictive clause does not change the fundamental meaning of the sentence on the details. Second example, the man who came to dinner is the mayor. The clause who came to dinner is restrictive because it identifies which man is the mayor. Without it, the sentence would be too broad. The man is the mayor. The last one is that instead of which is used only in essential or restrictive clauses. So do not put commas around clauses beginning with that. The first example is the poster that won first prize pleased both the judges and the viewers. This sentence uses that correctly. The clause that won first prize is restrictive because it's essential to identifying which poster pleased the judges and viewers. Without this clause, the statement is unclear. The absence of commas is grammatically correct because it's a restrictive clause. Second example is a poster that won first prize pleased both judges and viewers. This sentence is incorrect. The commas incorrectly set off the clause. The won first prize treating it as the non-restrictive clause. However, that cannot introduce a non-restrictive clause because they are set off by commas and add extra non-essential information. So let's proceed to the use of which in non-essential or non-restrictive clauses. Separate non-essential clauses from the rest of the sentence by commas. So the example is my car, which is a bright red convertible, is parked outside. The clause which is a bright red convertible is non-restrictive. It adds detail about the car but doesn't change the core fact that the car is parked outside. The commas correctly separate this extra information. The next one is the relative pronouns used in noun clauses are that, what, whatever, whoever, whomever, and whichever. We're going to say whatever. It introduces a noun clause indicating any unspecified thing. Whoever introduces a noun clause referring to any person, while whomever introduces a noun clause referring to any person as the object of a verb or preposition, and whichever introduces a noun clause indicating any unspecified thing from a set of options. Noun clause as subject. Whatever you offer will be appreciated. The entire clause whatever you offer acts as the subject of the verb will be appreciated. In noun clause as direct object, he will befriend whomever he gets acquainted with. The clause whomever he gets acquainted with is the direct object of the verb will befriend. So the last but not the least is look at the antecedent of who, that, or which when used as subject to decide whether the verb following should be singular or plural. The word antecedent is the noun or pronoun that the relative pronoun refers to. The verb in the relative clause must agree in number whether it is singular or plural with its antecedent. So the first example is the painting which is exhibited is the painter's masterpiece. So the antecedent there is the painting because it is singular. The relative pronoun is which refers to painting. And then the verb is singular is correctly used because it agrees with the singular antecedent painting. The second example is the farmers who own orchards earn much from their harvest. Antecedent there is the farmers. It is plural. In relative pronoun, it is the who refers to farmers. And then the verb there is the word own. It is actually plural is correctly used because it agrees with the plural antecedents of farmers. And that would be all, and thank you very much for listening.